Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Tim Boss, CEO at ShareRing. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Yonah. Good to be here.
Now, Tim, for those viewers of ours who might not be familiar with who you are, you want to give us a little background, kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain?
Yeah, so I mean, I've had a history of running my own businesses. I started my first business in the mid-90s, 1996, actually doing some jobs after work, helping companies understand computers and internet and all that sort of stuff. And then I gave that up and moved back into sort of working for IT. I worked for a video game company for a while as a general manager for their IT operations. Worked for an investment bank for a while, doing strategy for Asia Pacific. Worked for a Microsoft Accenture joint venture. So worked for a lot of big companies, and then I sort of left all of that sort of area in 2004 and started my own company, doing cloud services for GPS and fleet tracking and vehicle tracking and things like that. So did that for a number of years, sold that in 2008, and that company quickly became a $100 million company. Billion to be nice. And then in 2010, I started a peer-to-peer caravan rental business, so it's like Airbnb but for camper vans. I sold that to a publicly listed company in 2012, and then around 2012, 2013, I had this idea to create this platform for the sharing economy. So the idea was basically that any company could come in and run their own sharing and rental business on top of this platform. And we started to develop it and very, very quickly realized that with the rigid way that systems were APIs and all that were developed, it was very, very difficult to create this one-size-all economy, like what Amazon had done for shopping. Shopping's easy. You basically, someone goes online, they find a product, they buy it, they get it delivered. But rentals and sharing economy is very difficult because the rules behind every type of rental can be vastly different, the workflow and the reviews and all that sort of stuff. So we basically just moved it into doing car sharing. So we started a car sharing platform called Keys and ran that for a number of years. I sold that earlier this year to Wonder. In the meantime, we started sharing. So sharing is really developed around our dream of being able to create a versatile platform for the sharing and actually a number of other economies. And you know, it's what we call the next gen, the backbone for the next gen sharing economy. So it contains things like identity management, which I'll talk a lot more about soon, a rental platform, a reputation platform, payment system through our sharing pay, and a number of other things. So I really sort of came up with the idea of sharing, of using blockchain for that idea in 2016 after the Ethereum white paper came out. And that sort of made me look at it and said, wow, this really cool thing, this idea of running these smart contracts in like a virtual machine on top of blockchain technology where you could create like an interface that's not rigid. Anyone can build what they want on top of this platform and have this flexibility that we wanted to achieve. So that was really the birth of sharing.
Wow, I mean, you've really had your foot in many different industry. And I'm sure that gave you the know-how and the knowledge base to help propel sharing forwards. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned like one of your first jobs was actually explaining the internet, explaining this to new technologies. Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of carryover when it comes to blockchain because this technology is so new and it has similarities to internet in the terms of that it's basically a protocol layer. It's essentially something that you don't necessarily need to know how it's working unless you're working on the back end. Do you feel like just like before, a lot of your time was having to explain this new technology, something that it's very hard to visualize? If you're a person who's not familiar with the technology, it's hard to visualize new use cases. I'm sure if you go back to the beginning of the internet, people said, "What do I need this for? What do I need email for? I send mail and I send mail, physically." Do you find that you come into similar scenarios here where when you're trying to sell a product or push a product or build upon this technology, you're often having to kind of explain and sell what blockchain is to the customer first?
Totally. And the interesting thing is it takes a long time to figure out how to explain it so that anyone can understand it, right? So when the internet first came out, I remember saying to my partner at the time, and I sort of had this computer. Actually, the internet was around for a few years first, And I jumped on a search engine. I said, you can look for anything in the world. What do you want to search for? And she's sitting there and she goes, Barbie. And that was her first thing that she searched was Barbie. And it's just like, oh, this is lost on you. So, before that, I was doing things like dialing into bulletin board systems and creating things called multi-user domains and all that. But to try to explain to people what that actually is and what you could potentially do and what the potential was is incredibly hard. And it's probably taken me 2 years to get to the point where I feel like I can explain some of the benefits of blockchain. And we're still sort of finding out more and more benefits of blockchain as people develop different protocols as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's use ShareRing as an example. If someone wants to travel now, or someone, because I know you guys chose travel as one of your first use cases. Let's say someone wants to travel. They have options. They could go to Kayak and any of these travel aggregators. So how would you pitch it to them? How would you pitch it to them to say ShareRing, because it's powered by blockchain, it actually gives it an advantage here over any of these centralized options out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, what we basically looked at this when we started doing the travel stuff as travel version 4. So an interesting thing about travel is the technology behind it's been stuck in the dark ages for so long. And, a lot of people look at it and say, well, all I want to do is book a hotel, go to the hotel, check into the hotel. But through that process, there's so many inefficiencies there. The first one is the collection of someone's identity information. So, I have to sign up on a website like booking.com. I have to enter my information. I have to confirm it all. I book a hotel. And then when I go to the hotel, I have to tell that hotel all of my information again. They give me a little bit of paper. I have to fill it out by hand. I have to give them my passport. They scan my passport. So it's just such an inefficient process. So we looked at that and said, well, if we use, say, a blockchain identity process where we can actually have this self-sovereign ID that I'm in control of, it's not stored on a central server, and I can give it to the booking engine, so the bits and pieces that need to be done. So I can do a booking in one click. I can go to the hotel. The hotel's already got my information because it was sent to them in advance because I approved it. I don't have to give them my passport because I've given them an approved ID. I can basically go get my room key or use my mobile phone, go straight to my room, check in, and I'm in the hotel. And it's not limited to just a few of us large chains that lock you into using them. It gives people flexibility across the board, and you can use it for hotels, short stay apartments, and things like that. So we took that and said, that's what travel needs to be. And then, and the same with flights, like the process that you need to go through to book a flight, to do the pre-check-in, to do the check-in, to get your visa, to when you apply at the airport, you're waiting in the queue. So there's so many efficiencies that you can create just through a really good blockchain-based identity platform. And you add security, a huge amount of security there. You add traceability there. You add trust there. And for us, it just made sense to sort of go down that area as the first use case.
Mm-hmm. And I think people are realizing that more and more today, as the internet and smartphones and data really permeates our life more and more. I think people are starting to realize, the importance of kind of protecting or having control of our data, because up until now, we didn't realize, people didn't know 5 years ago when they would just press yes for everything, what they were really agreeing to and the amount of data and value that were given away. So when we're talking about, this ID management, this on a blockchain, kind of what ShareRing is doing. You mentioned if you want to traditionally check in a hotel, you give them your passport, they're copying it, and that's just laying around. There's just another copy of your passport out there in the world, and that's not the most ideal situation, especially if you're traveling to certain areas. When we're talking about IDs on the blockchain, and you need to provide your ID to the hotel, are they actually getting a copy of your ID, or they're just seeing, on the blockchain, is it kind of like a zero knowledge proof? They're seeing that there is an ID there is an approved passport, or they just have viewing privileges? How does it exactly work in terms of the access that the third party has to your ID?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way that we do it is basically on the blockchain, we don't store ID, and as you said, we store the fact that we have an ID. What we also do is we store a digital fingerprint of that ID. So say for example, I scan my passport. So what I do is on the app, I sign up for the app, I do a photo of my passport, we scan that, might do a photo of driver's license or any other information that I have, and we call that our folio, which is our sharing ID. And sharing ID is not just limited to identity documents. It could be insurance papers, it could be graduation certificate, it could be a COVID test, it could be vaccination proof. Like anything can actually be stored in there, as long as it's something that needs to be verified or authenticated and something that shouldn't change. So what we do is we scan the passport, we do a digital fingerprint, which is like a hash of the passport, and that hash is stored on the blockchain. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's stored on the blockchain is the person or the company that verified that passport. So for passports, it might be us that we verify it. So we go through a process to validate it. It might be, if it's a COVID test, it might be the test center that they validate it. So it's the validator and the hashes on the blockchain. And then when I check into the hotel, what our system does is it actually does a watermark over the top of the image of the passport to say who it's going to, the date that it's going to, and the hash, the digital identity. And we do that in a way that doesn't actually break that digital hash of it. So we can watermark it and it doesn't break the hash. That does get sent to the hotel. At the moment, it's required because a hotel still needs to prove to, say, the government or something like that, that they've actually checked you in. But if that document leaks or if someone steals it or anything like that, we know exactly where it's come from, because we know that if it leaks and we see a copy of the passport, it's got the hotel's identity on it, my identity, and all their hash and all that sort of stuff. So it's fully traceable, and it reduces the chance of it being reused as well, because it's got all these watermarks all over it.
Well, that's a really ingenious solution there, because you're essentially making the hotel liable. You're putting the onus responsibility on them because of that watermark. So that is a wonderful solution. And this is definitely traveling for many people is a stressful event. I mean, I just traveled. I'm in South Africa right now. That's why I have a different background to our viewers. And it is stressful because as we're leaving the apartment, I turn to my partner and I say, hey, do you have our passports? Do you have all our documents? And we keep it in a Ziploc bag. And essentially our entire ability to travel is just held in this Ziploc bag, and it could be lost, it could be stolen. And it's 2020. In my mind, IDs and verifications, all these things should be moving digital. There's no reason, why if I lose a booklet, a booklet is my a passport. The thing that gets me in and out of countries. But you mentioned something very interesting there. You mentioned also COVID tests. I had to take a COVID test to fly, and I had to prove many steps along the way that I had a COVID test. And I was actually really upset because I had to pay a good amount of money for this COVID test. And what was the proof that I had to show? It was a printed piece of paper on a regular A4 paper that just said my name and said I had a test. It was the most. I could have printed it out on my computer.
You could have changed it.
I could have changed it.
It could have said yes, you're positive, and you could have just changed it to say no, right? And we've had reports of that from a few other people. All they have is a printout or even a PDF file that you can go in and enter the information or put someone else's name in. So that's exactly the sort of thing that we're trying to help, because what sort of evidence do you have? It's almost like it's done just for the purpose of for show, without really any real sort of seriousness to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of things with the airport, also airport security, at least in the United States, it's proven again and again that the TSA, which is the Airport Security in America, they test it from time to time, and consistently 90 to 95% of illegal weapons and contraband get through. And it's more for show. It's to make you feel safe. Oh, look, they're checking. I feel safe. And I was so shocked when I saw this COVID test. It was a joke. My high school diploma was a more serious, harder thing to fake than this. And so when we're talking about the blockchain and sharing, right now, if I do get that COVID test on the sharing, that I could use that to travel. I could show that hash and with that watermark as well when I pass it along.
Yeah, so that's the type of document we call verified at source. So what that means is, instead of say the test center sending it to us or sending it to you, and then you putting it in your sharing ID, what happens is that the test center actually scans it at site, sends it into your sharing ID, and then it becomes part of your ID. what we then know is, number one, you own it still, so that becomes your own private data. But number two is we know that it hasn't changed between the test center and you. And then when you send it to the airline or the government for the visa, we know that it hasn't changed between those pathways as well. So, it's something that we've developed, and we're talking to a number of countries. We're talking to a couple of airlines, and then also suppliers at the airports for like, when you go through the entry gates and things like that, some of those suppliers. So we're in very advanced discussions. We're actually changing the dialogue a bit to be more about vaccinations. So for some of the airlines and countries, they want to know if people have been vaccinated to determine the risk profile as well. So that's where we're sort of changing the dialogue a little bit.
Yeah, that seems like that was gonna be one of my questions. That seems like the next logical step. Of course, as the vaccination starts to roll out, I'm sure that countries will require or want to know when you come in if you have that vaccination. And so when you actually approach these government agencies or these airport suppliers with this technology, for the most part, were they aware of this capability, of this use case of saying, hey, this is a trustworthy way of sharing data and verification? And two, how hard of a sell is it? Are they into it? Are they saying, wow, this is really great? Or are they saying they're confused and say, well, why don't we just maintain a database? Why don't how hard of a sell is it for them?
Yeah, it's interesting because first of all, to get in the door to talk to them, it's been surprisingly easy to get the discussion going with them. The first question they ask is, where else have you done this? And as a startup, it's very, very difficult to do that. So our approach is to partner with larger companies that have done stuff like that before, and then partner and basically go in as a partnership. And some of our partnerships with companies like Tencent and those sorts of ones actually helps us a huge amount in that discussion. The next question is, which is really interesting, which comes directly from the test centers, is why should we trust you with our data, right? So for us, it becomes a marketing and educational thing for them to understand, well, you're not trusting us with your data. We don't get the data. You're trusting yourself and the person you're giving the data to. That's it. And that changes the dialogue. And the next answer is, this is too much work. We're like, well, you know what? It's 2 clicks. But what we'll do is we'll put one of our people inside your test center for a while and actually do it for you. So that's sort of where the discussion is at the moment in that area there. So it varies in terms of the response we've got, but we've found that we do have good positive answers to move the discussion forward, and we've done endless amounts of sort of use cases and process flows so they understand it.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because if you look at the COVID and the effects that it's had, so it's had a lot of negative economic effects. But in terms of macroeconomic trends, if we're looking on a big scale, societal trends, it's actually accelerated a lot of things that were happening anyway. We're looking at the retail market. Retail was going online anyway. And they say that because of COVID, it's accelerated, like in the course of 10 months, it's shot forward 10 years in terms of online shopping adoption in many other areas. And I think here, if we're looking at use cases for the blockchain, I mean, verification, ID verification, seems like such an obvious one. And so do you think that right now, you guys are doing tremendous work in your negotiations right now for this vaccination verification? If this works and it takes off, can you see this as being kind of a big push for blockchain technology adoption by authorities and organizations? If they see it works here, then it becomes a much easier sale. Oh, by the way, why don't we move over your whole driver's license system onto the blockchain? Why don't we move, your medical records onto the blockchain? So can you see this really being kind of like a tipping point for blockchain?
Yeah, I do. But, one of the things that we need to make sure is that we consider interoperability. So, we're not going to try to be the one and only. There are other identity platforms out there. And I think the important thing is to say, well, if, say, United Arab Emirates is adopting this blockchain technology for identity verification, we need to make sure that we all have a plan to make it open enough for us to have interoperability. Because when we do that, then we get better and more widespread adoption of that technology. So number one is get the trust on the blockchain, which I think is happening now. I think when we talk to governments, they're not saying, "Ooh, blockchain, this is for crypto and crazy." They understand more about, why blockchain can be useful, especially in countries like Thailand, where they've been very, very quick to sort of have a positive view and adopt blockchain in a number of areas. So I think these sorts of real world and real benefits are actually going to be a catalyst for more widespread use of the technology.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about interoperability and composability. DeFi shows the value of that. I mean, we've seen it again and again. Just this Legos, this money Legos, as I like to say, in the explosion that's caused. So when we're talking about with sharing, one, did you guys build it from the ground up to be interoperable, or are you guys in talks with the other ID blockchain projects because you recognize that it kind of benefits everyone here to play nice together? Is there dialogue between you guys to make sure this happens?
Yeah, great question. So we built it from the ground up to be interoperable. So everything that we did has an open API. Everything that we've done actually allows other people to integrate with it, even without blockchain knowledge and experience. So we've got a standard API that you can integrate with to utilize the identity system without any blockchain knowledge. And we've got plugins that we've been developing that allow people to say, put a plugin on their WordPress website, and you can use your sharing ID to sign into that, say, WordPress website. And instead of having, we get rid of passwords basically in that sense, because you just scan the QR code and you're signed in. So for us, it's really, really important. The other things that we've done along the way is where we've seen a better standard compared to what we've actually been developing, we've done our best to just change what we're doing and adopt that standard. So there's a number of identity-based standards that we are adopting to make sure that we can guarantee a bit more interoperability, so that there is, portability of the identity across different chains as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned this kind of password. You don't need a password because it's already there, and that's another thing that if you ask users of the internet, which is pretty much slowly everyone in the world these days, one of the most frustrating things on the user experience side, and then one of the biggest security loophole on the other end, on the back end, is this passwords. Because once you're getting passwords and people require passwords, and because you need to remember so many passwords, you end up making it either the same across devices. You make it a word instead of a random string and hash of numbers. It's a word that could be guessed. And this has constantly been the most frustrating part of the internet, as well as the biggest security hole. And so do you think that with this blockchain solutions like you guys offer, we will finally see the end of passwords?
I believe that we can. I really do. I think that when you sign up for a website, websites need bits of information about you, and it's your name. The most basic is name and email address, but others might need address, maybe identity, proof of identity. You might be signing up for a bank or something like that. So it's not only the removal of passwords, which is great in itself, and effectively your biometric, your thumbprint or your face scan on your phone becomes your password to get into all of these services. So we're not only seeing that, we're also seeing the ability to very, very quickly sign up for services without having to, sign up to this one, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there. It's like sign up once, scan the QR, and you've signed up to 10 services in 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm. And so when it comes also QR codes, it's very popular in this sphere in terms of quickly, instead of having to type in a random string or hash of numbers, QR code. Is that, my question is, why not NFC, communication, near field communication, tapping? Is that merely because, there are more people have a camera on their phone to be able to scan a QR and not every phone has NFC? Is that because in my view, NFC
more
is more
universal.
convenient?
Yeah, NFC can be more convenient, but it's more, QR codes are very, very much universal, right? So every single phone has a camera on it, and you don't need to worry about, is this NFC supported by, is this type of NFC supported by this phone? Apple only just recently allowed you to do stuff with their NFC chip as well. So until, a year ago, that was off limits. So, for us, it just makes sense to do that. And we don't know, like in the future, we don't know what version of NFC there will be or what will be supported.
Right.
But we do know that cameras are going to always be there. And same with like if I want to sort of get access to a website, there's no NFC on my computer that I can scan with my phone to get access. So
Right.
it makes it so that it covers digital platforms as well as physical platforms.
Right. Very cool. All right. You know, especially we're talking about COVID and with sharing, it seems like you guys, I mean, I think it was the first major use case to go with travel.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that decision was before COVID hit. You know, so my question is this, I mean, obviously it's definitely a speed bump, at least in your plans. One, you know, how big of a hit has it been, you know, just because COVID has really, you know, knocked out of all the industries, travel has really, really been hit. So, I mean, I guess you could look at it two ways. You know, one, it definitely slows the rollout, but two, it gives you more time and an ability to kind of fix, optimize. But one, how big of a hit has it been? And two, you know, are you guys thinking of now, you know, potentially focusing on a different use case, you know, until COVID or ride it out?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So a lot of companies we've seen over COVID, blockchain companies, startups, and those sorts of things, basically looked back and they said, okay, the only way we're going to get through this is if we cut staff and we hunker down, we spend as little as possible and get in this for the long haul and then come out after the sun's shining again. We took a different approach and we basically said, okay, so travel is not happening at the moment. We've got this roadmap of products and enhancements that we want to do with the travel products. So we made a very, very focused decision to go back, look at our blockchain technology that we developed, look at the middleware platform and the apps, and really spend this time where everyone else is hibernating, actually growing our business and building better products and more things into our products. And our team has doubled in size since March. So we've hired more people. We've opened a new office. We've got someone this week. We're moving into a new office in Thailand. It's a 4-story townhouse style office, and we've got all 4 floors. And we've got someone basically renovating that for us at the moment. So we've grown substantially. We're negotiating with some companies to make investments in them as well, and they're strategic investments because they'll bring lots and lots of users onto our platform. We've launched our e-commerce platform as well, which is ShareRing Shop, which we've got partners in Australia and Thailand for. So, you know, if you had have said to me in March when everything started shutting down, where are you going to be in 9 months? I probably would have said, you know, hopefully travel will open up again and we can start selling that. But now, like with the plan that we put in place to say, let's grow in these areas, let's look at other uses of sharing ID. So we're talking about to banks, we're talking to governments, airlines, all sorts of companies about the usage of sharing ID. So instead of us sort of running out of the gates, we're exploding out of the gates at the moment in terms of what our opportunities are.
Well, that's amazing to see, and I'm happy that you guys are really using this opportunity to run forward instead of kind of hunker back. And I do think that's definitely going to play off in the short term and the long term. You know, if everyone is sitting down and you guys are racing forwards, you're going to win the race. So kudos to you there. Now you mentioned ShareRing Shop. How exactly does that work? What is the blockchain, or how is the blockchain adding value in the retailer or shopping sphere?
Yeah. So basically, when we started sharing, we sort of looked at a number of areas, and ShareRing Shop, the focus for us around that is to utilize sharing ID, to utilize sharing pay, which is our cross-border payment system with very, very low FX fees. We use our own stable coin, payments in fiat and crypto, number of things like that. And then a few of the other sort of features that were built into the platform. So ShareRing Shop was always going to be a longer term platform. So we were looking at late 2021 to do that. But with COVID, we saw very, very quickly that e-commerce was going to explode, right? So, and part of the reason why I personally saw that is, you know, in when SARS hit in 2006, 2005, I think it was. Around 2005, In China, a number of the e-commerce platforms then, that's what created the success out of those e-commerce platforms. So they were created off the back of SaaS. So when Alibaba started, is it Jingdong, JD, or one of the platforms, I can't remember the name, but when they started that was really off the back of that. And we saw the success of them and how successful e-commerce is in China with local deliveries and all that. So with Sharing Shop, what we decided to do was we saw a lot of shops closing down, couldn't open because the regulations. So we thought, what about an e-commerce platform that focused on shops, local shops, that basically said, okay, I'm here in this location in Melbourne, and we draw a 10-kilometre radius around it, and we get all the shops in that area on it, and we give people the same level of products that they might get from Amazon or something like that, and grocery, electronics, office products, and all of that. But it's from local suppliers. And we create a delivery system where we pick up from those, do the milk run to pick up from the local suppliers and deliver to you on the same day. So wow. That's effectively what we create. And we spent a long time testing it. We've got a rollout that's happening in Thailand now through a big partner over there. And then we've got a new partner here in Australia that's actually rebranding and rolling it out over here as well now that we've finished the testing. So it's something we potentially see it as a game changer. There's a lot that has to go right for it to be successful. But the idea is to find partners around the world that are willing to basically pick up that hub, which is that effectively 10-kilometre radius, and run it in their region and get local shops on board, wholesalers, retailers, and things like that, and actually run the Sharing Shop in their region as well.
Mm-hmm. And shopping locally has never been more important in terms of supporting, because right now, the economic crunch due to COVID has really hit places, especially depending on where you are, if there's even a lockdown, definitely important. And when we're talking about, you mentioned the delivery, have you guys have to build out your whole delivery infrastructure, or are you guys kind of doing a decentralized delivery where, anyone who wants to deliver can kind of get a notification on the blockchain and deliver it there?
So it's a bit of a mix. So we made it once again to be flexible. So we've developed 3 apps out of this. One is the Sharing app, and the Sharing app has travel, it has shopping in there. It's going to have a bunch of other services like mini apps within it. So the shopping experience is within the app, and it's really cool the way it's actually structured. I'm looking forward to demoing it. Then we've also built a merchant app, so that's for the shops. And we did that because we noticed that a lot of merchants didn't have a computer in their shop where they could load products and take photos. So we made the merchant app where you can simply log in with your Sharing ID, take a photo of a product, enter the details, and bam, it's in the system. So a very, very quick way of loading it. They can say their stock levels and all of that. And then the other app, which is answering your question, was what we call the Sort and Deliver app. And that's exactly that. So what it does is it tells the driver in the morning what the milk run needs to be, which is picking it up from all of the shops. And then it tells the drivers where the drop-offs need to be. So it's like a delivery app. And that's used either 100% by, say, Australia, or it's used about 80% by our partners in Thailand, because our partner there is actually a logistics company. So their specialty is deliveries. So it makes it, they find it very useful, but they've also got their own delivery app as well.
And I must say, when I got this interview scheduled in, I saw the name ShareRing, and I thought, maybe this is a charity blockchain or something. Yep. But you guys, you really have quite a variety of offers here. I mean, you mentioned you want to be the Amazon, this kind of one-stop shop, and I must say I'm really impressed with how fleshed out your ecosystem is, even so early on, where you already have, like you mentioned, 3 apps just for the shopping, and really focusing on making the user experience good, because I think that's really lacking in the blockchain space. A lot of companies, I think they would see it and be like, oh, okay, blockchain could help here. Let me shoehorn it in as a shopping app and let them figure it out. But I really like how you're noticing even the small things. Like you mentioned, you notice that most merchants don't have a computer in the shop. And so you actually built this app to really help the user experience. And that's what makes successful businesses. So kudos to you for noticing even the small things. because I do think that goes really a long way.
Thanks.
You mentioned that you have a couple things in the pipeline, you said mini apps on the ShareRing app itself. Is there anything you're able to speak about now?
So I'll give some examples. So
okay.
Without actually speaking very specifically. So think of banking and finance. So someone within the app might sign up for a local bank and have banking services within the app. There might be car rental in the app. So when we see car rental as not searching for a car, booking a car, turning up, waiting for an hour to get the keys, handing your ID over, scanning all that. We see booking a car rental as choosing the car, going to the car, scanning a QR code on the car door unlocks, you get in and you go off. So there's a number of different sort of services that we're looking at offering. I mentioned the WordPress login. So we've created a plugin for that, which allows you to scan websites. So we're in discussions with a couple of companies that do a lot of WordPress hosting, like over 1,000 websites, for them to adopt it for their clients as well as a free plugin. We're talking to a company that's very heavily involved in the gig economy as well, and like the online gig economy. So using that identity management system as a sign-up tool to be a verified user on the platform. Things like credit ratings as well. So we're looking at using it there. So yeah, I mean, it seems broad, but we're really sort of focused on three main areas. One is obviously travel, which we see sharing economy is very heavy in the travel. Banking and finance, which goes hand in hand with payments and payments as services, and then gig economy, which once again is very much part of the sharing ecosystem.
Yeah, and I mean, the use cases when it comes to ID and blockchain really are quite staggering. And I wish, I mean, the experience you just mentioned when it comes to renting a car, just going up to the car, scanning it, getting in, and driving, seems like a revelation compared to what we have to do now, where it really is. I mean, in my mind, going and renting a car, it's like in the same thing as, it's not as bad, but it's in the same like negative realm as like going to the dentist. Like there's just a negative connotation where it's kind of going to be a drag. So it is wonderful to hear that you guys are working on optimizing and streamlining these experiences as well. Now, when we're talking about IDs, and I was thinking, you know, we have this abilities, you have this technology. Where else can you know, a digital ID and on a blockchain, a secure ID be optimized and help in the real world? And when it comes to face-to-face, if I'm going, you know, to the local quick shop and I want to buy some beer, I have to prove that I'm old enough to drink. They're there. I have to show them ID. It works great. But a place where age limitations kind of don't work or aren't effective is online. You go to an adult website. It says, "Are you 18 plus?" Press here, yes or no.
Oh, yeah.
Any kid could press yes, or the best, which says enter your date of birth. I don't think I've ever entered my actual date of birth.
He won't do that.
Yeah,
he's breaking the law.
I press the year.
He won't do it.
I press the year. I scroll down to the oldest year possible, and that's my year. I think on most websites I'm 125 years old. So clearly, when it comes to proving your age online, you know, it's a ridiculous system. It's not really stopping anybody. Can you see you know, a future? Are you guys already in discussions or thinking about utilizing your IT technology to actually put effective age restrictions online?
Yeah, it's something that we've spoken very heavily about, and we're sort of looking at what's the best approach for this and what are the best websites or type of sites to actually approach first. Because the thing is, you don't want to be shoehorned in the wrong area if you jump on that too quickly. So we need to sort of get a breadth of sites and stuff first. The other thing is proof of age in the physical world, in the real IRL, is, you know, in terms of going to bars, right? So when you go to a bar, you're at the entrance to the bar, it's reasonably dark. You've got the security guy who's looking at your ID, trying to do it. He holds it under a UV light. He's looking again. He's like, yeah, okay, let you in, right? Instead, you go up, you scan a QR code in the bar. There might be a little LED screen or something like that basically says, yep, you can go in. That's it. Right? So that's something that our tech could do. Or the security guy might just have a phone, and you scan a QR code, it pops up on his phone with a photo. So you can say, yeah, that's you. and a tick box saying your age is good, and you go in. So we definitely see benefits of that technology in the real world as well as online as well.
Yeah, and that happens also. A lot of places, they just want your age, and yet the only way to prove your age is to show your entire ID, is to show also your address and your name and your data. And when all they need is a date of birth. So it's also really great, with the blockchain ID, that you could just check. They don't even have to know even how old you are. It can show a check that you're old enough. And I think this circles back to users gaining more control over what data and what other private data does get shared, and what they actually control.
Well, imagine linking one of the things like a VIP membership to it as well. So you go to the bar, you scan, tick box, it's gold. The security guy's like, oh yeah, you're a VIP, you go in. So it's that additional data that we can provide a richer experience than just showing an ID.
Right, and then I mean, if I'm already even rolling with it, once data could be trusted, once it's trustless because it's on the blockchain and it could be trusted. I mean, I could see benefits for all parties. For instance, if I'm a member of a gym, and every time I'm going into the gym, I'm proving it on the blockchain, and so therefore my visits to the gym are on the blockchain. Maybe I get discounts with my health insurance because they know, ooh, I trust this. I'm able to see, that this member goes to the gym every so often and whatever. And I could see areas where it's beneficial for everyone, while not letting all the data out there. The future is bright for thanks to in part to sharing, and so once again, I am excited for that. And you mentioned before that you guys have a token, you have a share token. What exactly is the role of the share token in this whole ecosystem?
Yeah, so we basically, instead of hosting on Ethereum or creating protocols on existing blockchains, we developed our own blockchain on the Tendermint framework. So the same as sort of Cosmos SDK and all that. So we've got masternode holders around the world, and those masternode holders need to earn fees somehow. So share token was created effectively as the utility of the blockchain. So we've done it a little bit differently though. So instead of somebody that uses our platform having to buy share token and pay in share token to use the blockchain, what we do is we just charge in fiat. So when say a consumer of ID, as an example, they might pay, let's say, 50 cents for the ID, and they'll pay 50 cents in USD or whatever their local currency is. That gets transferred, that goes to us. We then purchase share token on the open market, either on the exchanges or Uniswap, and then the share token that we receive goes straight out to the masternode holders. So they actually get paid for processing transactions. So every single transaction that comes through the platform, they receive the share token for. The benefit of that is it gets locked up. They'll unlock some of it sometimes, and it creates more scarcity. And we've got mechanisms to make sure that the velocity of the token stays at an optimal level, and that we don't end up with all of them orphaned or locked up inside the masternodes, so that they keep in circulation, that create that scarcity that people obviously want to see.
And I think that's a interesting or a forward-thinking move to actually charge in fiat, because if you actually were charging just with a share token denominated in share token, it's possible that if the share token goes really high in value, it kind of gridlocks the network, because no one's going to want to pay $100 to check the ID.
Exactly.
So that does prevent against that. Something that Ethereum, unfortunately, is facing with again and again, as DeFi and as the network gets bogged down, gas fees go higher, it kind of gridlocks the network, prices out a lot of transactions. Now, you mentioned you guys are working with the Cosmos SDK. Why did you guys choose to go with that as opposed to building on any other blockchain?
Yeah, so the decision was made about 2.5 years ago. So we looked at a lot of platforms that were in development. So a few factors we need to look at. Number one is we didn't want to be at the whim of another blockchain where we didn't truly understand the roadmap of that blockchain. So if we were on sort of some of the other blockchains out there that have failed and got no users, or don't have enough node holders to be very secure, or like Ethereum, where the price has gone through the roof for transactions, or and so on. So we didn't want to fall for that trap, because I saw where that was leading. We also wanted to make it so that it was effectively custom made for our requirements, and our requirements were, we needed to have things like the ability to have assets on it, and potentially billions of assets. We wanted to have the ability to have lots of transactions very, very quickly. We wanted to be able to create our own tokens, define our own pricing model, define the cost. So there's so many aspects that we did, and Tendermint ticked most of them at the time, but the roadmap actually ticked pretty much all of them. And they've been true to their word in terms of what's been developed in the roadmap. Things like, we were worried about size constraints because Tendermint is, or any proof of stake blockchains, are actually quite heavy on disk space. And the latest release has got something called state syncing, which actually allows our node holders to not host the entire blockchain, just basically to have a portion of it, which reduces disk space. So yeah, everything that we've hoped for is basically, they've been true to their word so far.
And you mentioned that essentially the thing that's funding all the nodes is that the consumer of the request, whether it be ID or the transaction, is paying in fiat. I wonder, because it's in fiat, one of the disadvantages of the current financial system when you're talking with fiat is the unfeasibility. I guess that's the word. The infeasibility.
Unfeasible. Yeah.
The unfeasibility of microtransactions. So if it is 50 cents, well, you're sending them a bill at the end of the month? I mean, how is it working? If I'm a bar and I'm checking IDs, it costs 25 cents to check an ID. How is that actually, that transaction happening or the payment happening?
Yeah, so they'll just buy bulk packs numbers in advance. So they might basically buy 1,000 in advance. We give them a discount for that. So and then it just comes off that 1,000 that they've purchased. And it's a pretty simple model, and it's actually one of the reasons why the user that creates the ID, we don't charge them. So they create their ID, it gets verified, all that sort of stuff. We don't charge them, because that's where you fall in the trap of having to try to take these micro payments from them. But then what we realize is the consumer of the data is actually the one that benefits more on a case-by-case basis, and they're the ones that are willing to pay. Like a bank will pay a few dollars to verify someone, whereas a consumer is not going to pay the bank a few dollars for them to verify the consumer, right? So the model's very, very flexible in that way. And the other way is if we're charging for services like travel, or EVs are on arrival, or insurance or something like that, we can basically do the ID part for free, because we might make a small margin on the travel that goes back to the master node holders as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely exciting. These are the type of use cases. For so long, we're talking about where's the killer use case, and historically for the blockchain, it's kind of been speculation on different coins. So it's very exciting to see these real world use cases that are bettering people's lives, making it easier, making it cheaper. That's always good to see. And I think a really important point here in this whole thing that people might not realize, but it's important to realize. Usually we're so used to now when we get a free service like Facebook, like WhatsApp, like Google, like Android on our phones, these operating systems, they're free, but we're paying with our data. And I think it's important for people to understand, in this case, that's not what's happening. It's free and you're not paying with your data. You own your data, you're keeping your data. So it truly is free because the economic incentives work out there. And that's a very different transaction than what people are traditionally used to. And in my opinion, a much more beneficial transaction for the users and for the consumers. So I do thank you for making it so. You really could have gotten greedy, charged both sides, charged the user, sold the data, and I think it's really important that we're moving away from this business model that has really, I think, caused a lot of issues in the world. So I do thank you for that. And last question before I do let you go, Because I'm sure you are very busy. You're juggling a whole lot of verticals and use cases there.
I'm just watching the Bitcoin price.
And what are we at right now? Before the interview, we were at, I think, 19.
Yeah, I just closed it. It was 19.5 just before we started, I think.
Incredible. I mean, listen, this is the beauty. I could be an interview and it could go up.
No, it's down to 94.
All right, it goes up and down.
Yeah.
So right now, it seems like you guys got the infrastructure there, and especially with the travel, with the shop. When do you foresee, like right now, this is available in Australia, in Thailand. People can right now do the shop. Is the travel globally running yet?
No, so Shop in Australia was launched earlier this year. It went on so we pulled it from pulled the website a few weeks ago because we basically have partnered with a new company that's relaunching it under a new brand name. So that's coming. I'm expecting probably next week they'll relaunch it, and then we're basically releasing the sharing app within the next few weeks. And the sharing app will basically give people a chance to download the app, sign up for Sharing ID, and get ready for all of the sort of the services that we're going to be launching off the back of that. So, we're going to be inviting people to the soft launch over the next few weeks so they can actually just test it out, download it, get IDs up there, and then the first, I think it's 50 or 100,000 people, which is a lot of people to download it, are going to get some really, really solid freebies out of it as well. So yeah, we're just sort of getting ready to gear up for the campaign there, which we're really excited about.
Well, very exciting times, Tim Bose. Thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot of fun on the horizon, and I can't wait till it's out. And hopefully, I've been dealing with the headache on this travel. Hopefully, my next trip I'll be doing on ShareRing. Tim, thanks so much for sharing and being the time with us, and for all of our viewers here at Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks so much.